Okay, so I've been really digging into this Gold Seal certification prep material.
Yeah.
And I got to say something that's kind of surprised me is like how much strategy goes into something that seems as simple as just hiring subcontractors.
Yeah.
It's not just like, hey, here's the job, can you do it?
Right.
There's like a whole procurement process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole process. And it's critical. I think a lot of people miss that. It's really critical to the success of any project. You can think about it almost like putting together a championship team.
Right.
But instead of athletes, you're handpicking the skilled tradespeople and specialists that are actually going to bring this vision to life.
So like, picking the right people is critical.
Absolutely.
But this whole procurement thing, I guess that's what we're diving into today, right?
That's right.
We're looking at what this training document calls the subcontract procurement process.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with something like this?
Well, the first step, like with anything else, is you're really just kind of developing a strategy, a procurement strategy.
Okay.
It's almost like coming up with a blueprint, but just for how you're going to find and secure the best subcontractors.
Yeah.
You're laying the groundwork for the entire process.
So is that like figuring out, what tasks you actually need to subcontract out
Yeah.
and how that fits in with, the bigger picture of the whole project?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to figure out what's the scope, what are we subcontracting out. But what's important, and I think sometimes overlooked, is you have to make sure that your goals for procuring these subcontractors are actually aligned with the goals of the project.
Right, right,
So
right.
for instance, like if cost effectiveness is like the main goal,
Yeah, yeah.
your procurement strategy has to reflect that.
Makes sense.
Or if you've got to meet a specific quality standard,
Yeah.
that's going to influence how you pick the subcontractors too.
And I'm assuming timelines are a big one too.
Oh, huge.
Because you don't want to pick a subcontractor who's going to throw the whole project off.
Absolutely. So that's where, you get into this concept of what they call the critical path,
Okay.
which is basically a project management term. But all it means is the sequence of tasks that absolutely have to be done on time.
Okay.
If not, the whole project's delayed.
Right.
And so when you're choosing these subcontractors, you have to think, okay, how does their proposed timeline affect the critical path?
Right.
Because any delays on that critical path from the subcontractor
Yeah, yeah.
are going to have a ripple effect.
Totally.
The whole thing gets pushed back.
It's like dominoes, eh? Like one misses and the whole thing goes down.
Exactly, exactly.
So once you've kind of figured out the strategy part,
Yeah.
what's next? How do you actually find these subcontractors?
So now comes the fun part. This is where you start preparing and issuing what are called requests for proposals.
RFPs.
RFPs, yeah.
So is that basically a document that says, hey, this is what I need from you?
Exactly. It's like a really detailed shopping list, but instead of groceries,
Right.
you're asking for expertise and manpower and these really specific deliverables.
Right.
And like you were saying, the strategy part, a good RFP can be the difference between getting top-tier subcontractors or settling for kind of the mediocre.
Right, right.
You want your project to stand out, and get the best people working on it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So what kind of information goes into one of these RFPs?
So you really have to be crystal clear about everything. The scope of the work, the deliverables that you're expecting, what are the deadlines, and then how you're actually going to evaluate the proposals that come in.
Okay.
And I think one of the other things that people miss sometimes is you have to communicate payment terms and expectations.
So yeah.
And that's where a lot of the standard industry contracts come in, like the ones that the Canadian Construction Documents Committee puts out.
Right, right.
They kind of provide a framework to make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands what their obligations are.
Right.
It helps you avoid those nasty surprises down the line.
Makes sense.
So,
Yeah, and you're talking about evaluating those proposals. I imagine that can be kind of overwhelming,
yeah,
going through all those submissions.
absolutely.
So how do you determine, which subcontractor is the best fit for the project?
So, you start with that criteria that you outline in the RFP, right?
Yeah.
Technical capabilities, experience, cost effectiveness. Those are big ones. But there are also those less obvious things you've got to consider,
Yeah.
What's their safety record like?
Mm.
Do their values align with yours?
Right.
And like we talked about, how well does their schedule mesh with that critical path for the whole project?
So it's not just about, finding the cheapest person. Right.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes someone might be a little bit more expensive,
Right.
but if they have a really great reputation for quality and timeliness
Yeah.
or safety, they might be a better choice in the long run.
Right. Totally. So you've gone through all those proposals, you've narrowed it down to, a few good contenders.
Right.
What happens next?
Well, then we move into what we call the negotiation phase, and that's
Hmm.
really just about making sure everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
Before you kind of set things in stone, this is where you might clarify anything that wasn't super clear in the proposals,
Right.
fine-tune the schedules, and address any potential risks or concerns that came up while you were evaluating everybody.
One thing I've always been kind of, I don't know, I guess, interested in is like, how do you handle payment stuff?
Yeah.
Is that all part of this negotiation?
Absolutely, yeah. You have to be really clear about how you're communicating the payment terms and the expectations.
Right.
And again, this is where those standardized contract forms can be really, really helpful, like the CCDC 31.
Okay.
It provides this really clear kind of industry accepted framework for outlining those payment milestones and how you're going to handle disputes
Right.
and other just financial aspects. Think of it like a common language that everyone in the industry speaks,
Right.
so everybody knows what's going on.
So you're saying using those forms can actually help prevent like misunderstandings
Oh, yeah,
and those, potentially costly legal battles later down the road.
exactly. So once all that negotiation's done and everyone's agreed,
Yeah.
now it's time to put it all in writing. We got to draw up the contracts.
And I imagine that having really clear language in those contracts is key,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
There can't be any like, wiggle room when it comes to the scope of work,
Hmm.
the deliverables, the timelines, and of course, all those payment details.
Yeah. A well-written contract protects everyone involved and really minimizes the risk of disagreements or disputes later.
Right.
It's also super important to integrate those subcontracts into the main project schedule and budget,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
just so you know that everything's kind of staying on track.
Right, right. So, okay, so the contracts are signed, everybody's happy. Can you finally kind of kick back and relax at this point?
Not quite. I mean, this is where things get interesting,
Yeah.
right? Because now you're into what's arguably the most important stage, monitoring and evaluating compliance.
So it's not just set it and forget it, right?
Right.
You're actually involved the whole way through.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
You need a system to track if the subcontractors are meeting their obligations,
Okay.
hitting the milestones, and delivering the work on time to the standard that you guys agreed upon.
Right.
It's like quality control for the life cycle of the project.
What kind of systems are we talking about here?
So there are a bunch of different tools and strategies. I mean, regular site visits are a big one.
Right.
Progress reports and just open communication. Those are kind of the basics. And then there are also tools like the CCDC 11 that can be helpful in this stage.
Hmm.
That one's all about making sure that you know that the contractors are qualified,
Okay.
keeping an eye on that.
This kind of reminds me of, that example that was in the training document about the project that needed that really specialized mechanical work.
Yeah.
They seem to really get this whole process right. That detailed RFP, the really thorough evaluation, and then really keeping an eye on things after they pick the subcontractor.
It's a great example. Getting this right, the procurement, it minimizes the risks, it keeps the project on time, and you end up with a really high quality product at the end.
I can see now why this is such a big deal for the whole Gold Seal certification.
Yeah,
It's not just about hiring people.
right.
You're showing that you can manage this complex process and make the right decisions so that the whole project is a success.
Exactly. Yeah. It shows that you've got a deep understanding of all the project management principles, that you can handle complex situations, that you can work with people, and that you can uphold the integrity of the contracts.
Right.
Those are all the core competencies you need to be Gold Seal certified.
So for anyone out there listening who's working towards that Gold Seal certification, think about this. With all the changes in the construction industry, all the new tech coming out, how do you think this whole subcontract procurement process is going to change in the future?
Yeah.
Just something to think about as you're on your way to becoming, one of the top project managers out there.
Great point.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
See ya.